Americans For Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans For Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, May 17th, 2019. You hear a lot in the news today about a dispute that will greatly affect not only the United States, but also the citizens of China, and that's the trade negotiations and tariffs being imposed on products of both countries. In an article by Kimberly Amadeo published at thebalance.com entitled China's Economy and Its Effect on the U.S. Economy, The Surprising Ways China Affects the U.S. Economy, these facts about China-U.S. trade were explained. China has 1.38 billion people, but the standard of living for most of its people is much lower than in the U.S., and that allows Chinese wages to be much lower than in the U.S. In 2018, China exported a total of $2.2 trillion worth of production and shipped 18% of these exports to the United States, while the U.S. exported a total of $1.6 trillion, the EU $1.9 trillion. In 2018, the U.S. imported, i.e. bought, $540 billion worth of goods from China, but exported, i.e. sold, just $120 billion worth, leaving a $420 billion trade deficit. Now, as of December 2018, the Chinese held $1.2 trillion of the $15.87 trillion worth of outstanding U.S. Treasury notes. The U.S. Census Bureau compiled some numbers on U.S. imports and exports for 2018. They showed a total trade deficit for the year to be $878.7 billion. Now, as noted above, our trade deficit with China alone for 2018 was $420 billion, so trade with China accounts for nearly half of the United States' total trade deficit. Now, just what do we import from China? According to the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, here are the categories of things we imported from China in 2018. China was the United States' largest supplier of goods imports in 2018. The top import categories in 2018 were electrical machinery, $152 billion, other machinery, $117 billion, furniture and bedding, $35 billion, toys and sports equipment, $27 billion, and plastics, $19 billion. U.S. total imports of agricultural products from China totaled $4.9 billion in 2018, making China our third largest supplier of agricultural imports. Leading categories there include processed fruits and vegetables, $1.2 billion, fruit and vegetable juices, $393 million, snack foods, $222 million, spices, $167 million, and fresh vegetables, $160 million. U.S. imports of services from China were an estimated $18.4 billion in 2018. That's 5.5% more than in 2017 and 68.3% greater than 2008 levels. Leading services imports from China to the U.S. were in transport, travel, and research and development sectors. So, why do we import stuff from China? Now, up to now, most of the imports from China were not because of direct sales from Chinese sales representatives. Nope. Most of the imports from China were the result of U.S. manufacturers like Apple contracting to have iPhones, iPads, and Mac computers produced and or assembled in China and then imported into the U.S. for sale. An article posted on the internet at aljazeera.com looks at how Apple contributes to the China trade deficit. These numbers were provided by IHS Markit, the London-based global information provider. IHS Markit estimates the components of the iPhone X cost a total of $370.25. $110 of that goes to Samsung Electronics in South Korea for supplying displays. Another $44.45 goes to Japan's Toshiba Corporation and South Korea's SK Hynix for memory chips and to other suppliers. The actual payment to a Chinese contract manufacturer that assembles the phones is estimated to be between 3 and 6% of the total cost. However, the entire $370.25 is counted as an import from China when over 90% of it was attributable to purchases from other countries. Now, there may be many reasons why President Trump is demanding that China clean up its act, but it seems that a few more questions here need to be answered. For starters, why is Apple buying iPhone parts from foreign suppliers and not ones in the U.S.? The answer is simple. The price is lower. However, what is ignored is one of the major reasons that other countries can charge those lower prices, and that's the subsidy for foreign goods created by the present income payroll tax system. For example, Apple imports the iPhone for a cost of about $400 a piece, sells them for $1,000 each, for a gross profit of $600 on each unit. But you have to subtract all the expenses associated with the Apple Store and overhead to get the true picture. So if Apple ends up with a net profit of just 10%, then they would owe corporate taxes on $100. Now, if the fair tax replaces the income payroll tax system, then life is different. Apple would not pay the fair tax on the $400 imported phone, but if they wanted to sell them for a retail price of $1,000, they would need to reduce the actual product price of the phone to $770 and collect $230 in fair tax on each one for a total of $1,000. Remember now that the fair tax is included in the retail prices. Now, if Apple wants to keep their product price at $1,000, then it would have to retail them for $1,300 to include the fair tax. But before you conclude that the fair tax will make everything significantly more expensive, remember that under the present income payroll tax system, you need to earn at least $1,300 in order to net the $1,000 you need to buy the phone. So, if the actual cost to consumers is not increased by the fair tax, and it isn't, what's the effect? The effect is that the U.S. manufacturers are not going to be punished by having to include the cost of the income payroll tax system in the prices of what they produce. This means that with the fair tax, U.S. suppliers and manufacturers would be able to charge Apple between 12 and 20% less for their products and still make the same profits. The imported goods are no longer subsidized by the income payroll tax system, but are treated the same way. This means that Apple may be able to source more of their components in the U.S. and, after deducting costs for shipping, do so at a price very close to what they're now paying foreign suppliers. In conclusion, many of the large U.S. companies are now moving their assembly and production contracts from China to other Asian countries. President Trump's move to add tariffs will not reduce the overall trade deficit. It will just add direct cost to the prices Americans pay. For example, if there's a 25% tariff imposed on $1,000 Apple phones, then the price to consumers will no longer be $1,000, but $1,250. When you figure that you have to earn $1.25 to net $1 under the present income payroll tax system, the real cost becomes $1,562. This is a terrible result when the trade deficit could be more efficiently balanced by eliminating the subsidy to imports and the penalty on U.S. exports by passing the fair tax. Under the fair tax, prices don't go up, more Americans have high-paying jobs, and the U.S. is once again competitive on the global stage without the income payroll tax penalty. So here's the real question. Isn't it time to stop looking at Band-Aids and start looking at actually curing the problem?
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org or bigsolution.org.